Welcome to USA Football's Coach and Coordinator Podcast, where top football coaches from around the country share their stories, philosophies, concepts, and strategies to help you get better on and off the field. Now, here's your host, Keith Grabowski.
Hey, coaches, before we get going today, I just wanted to thank you for all you've been doing to support this podcast. And we have an incredible lineup coming up here. We have just about every major college conference represented. We have a ton of FBS coaches, Division II coaches, Division III coaches, some great high school football coaches coming on the podcast to share with you and help you grow professionally during this time. I really appreciate all of you asking your questions on Twitter. Please follow me at Coach K. Grabowski for our daily updates on our guests and your opportunity to ask questions. We will read them on the show and attribute those to you. So please contribute to the show as much as you can. I also want to talk to you a little bit about our football development model, which is something we've rolled out here at USA Football. And this is really for you to be able to help your youth football programs develop. It's about a long-term athlete development plan. It's something that comes off of the American development model, which is something that the USOC has put together. The idea is that we're able to teach skills in a progression starting at the youngest ages. We're also looking at the different game types we have, whether that's flag, which is non-contact, limited contact games like padded flag or tackle bar, and full contact, and the right progressions for contact teaching there as well. Be sure to check out all we do at footballdevelopment.com and check out what we're doing with the FDM, the football development model, at usafootball.com/FDM. usafootball.com. Today, we're going to talk to a coach who's joined us before on this podcast, although the last time he was at Villanova, now he is at Princeton, and that is Coach Brian Flinn. Coach, it's great to have you back on the podcast.
Yeah, great to be back. Got some free time nowadays, so happy to be here.
So, Coach, you do have kind of the unique move here. Most of the time when I talk to guys who move from a college job to a college job, they got to rip their family up or maybe live apart from them for a long time. But your move actually brought you closer to home as far as the commute, and because you don't have the tolls, saved you a little bit of money as well.
Yeah, it did. So I went from Villanova to Princeton in February of last year, and it's about 10 miles closer. I didn't have to move, nobody to change schools, none of the stuff that's, really difficult, which as I was doing it, it was funny because going to a new place, it was so different for me, learning a new system and learning who the players are, developing a relationship with them. My wife would kind of joke with me like, yeah, you're complaining how tough it is on you. You didn't have to move. There's none of the other peripheral things that are super difficult. None of those were, everybody did the same thing but me. So, but no, it's been a really good deal. I've known Bob Strace, our head coach here, for a number of years before I came on, and had a good relationship with Sean Gleason, who left, and had always come here to talk ball. Dennis Goldman was the wide receiver coach here, which is a name a lot of people know. Legendary wide receiver coach. Coach Marvin Harrison at Syracuse. So we always come over to Princeton when he was at Princeton and talk football with him. So I was familiar with a lot of what went on around here, a lot of the success. The year before I got here, they scored 47 points a game. They had two receivers who are both in the league now as tight ends, Jesper Horsted and Steve Carlson. Jesper's with the Bears, Steve's with the Browns. And then the quarterback, John Lovett, is with the Kansas City Chiefs as a tight end. So that, we lost kind of all those guys, but it was exciting to me to kind of come and really learn this system that's, been so successful over Bob's 10 years here.
So, Coach, there is that adjustment, right? You were at Villanova. How many years at Villanova? I know you were there a long time.
14. Yeah, I was there 14 years.
So just the adjustment of making that move, going to a new place, probably the change of scenery is great, but then there's those initial challenges, I guess, to get yourself settled in. What was that like for you?
If I put into practice, the one thing I would always tell my incoming freshmen, that, okay, you're not it's like learning a new language, and you're not going to instantly in your brain, if you're going from English to Spanish or from, French to Spanish, you're in your brain, it's still going to go back to the old language. So it's, it's a process, and you learn little bits at a time. And, how to eat the elephant, you eat it one bite at a time. All those things I would preach to my freshmen that, like, when it was time for me to do it, was a little bit more difficult. because I had thought, this formation was this to me for, almost 20 years. And now it's not a word, it's a number, for example. So I think that for me was, really took me the longest, but I think it also benefited me the most, because I think there's a lot of things that we do that I never thought to do, because I was so ingrained in my ways in terms of how we got lined up and how we did some things that have really made me a better coach. And I just think in general, like everybody talks about, it's good to get thrown outside your comfort zone and do something different. It's hard to do that when you're in the same place. No matter how much you do, whether you switch positions or, when I was at Villanova, we kind of changed our whole offense from numbers to words in the middle, and that was good. That kept you sharp. And, when we originally went to no huddle, but I think there's really nothing better for you than to, all right, figure this out, because I think you learn so much, because there's so many things that we never did before that I think have really made me a better coach and kind of helped me to see the game a little bit differently than I did before, which I think is hard to do when you've been coaching 20 years and you're middle-aged and you're kind of, hey, this is this and that's it, so it's been really, really good.
So Coach, you're doing things a little bit differently now, right? Princeton, there's always going to be that adjustment. Certainly you're coming over there because you've done things well, and there's the familiarity with with the staff, as you said, but how are things a little bit different for you now, as far as, the football side of things, the scheme, et cetera?
I think, and this goes back to Bob's, when Bob first got hired here as the head coach, James Perry was the offensive coordinator. And James was known for, James would do anything. I mean, he was a muddle huddle guy. He's one of the first people to put multiple quarterbacks on the field. He did a bunch of really, really different stuff and cool stuff that people kind of latched onto and had great success. They scored a bunch of points and won the league and all that. And I think that gets, even to this day, you talk about what Sean did before he left and went to Oklahoma State, scoring a ton of points. We had 3 quarterbacks in the league. I think some of the flashier elements of what we do have really garnered a lot of attention. And again, a lot of that stuff's maybe better because there's stuff that we do that I've kind of never been around. But one of the simplest things for me, and a lot of people do this, junior high coaches do it, Pee Wee ball, everybody does it, is our outside guys don't change sides. And for me, for years, I have to know where the X receiver is. Like, the X receiver is our guy. We want to throw to him on third down. You usually have one guy who's different than everybody else. And I'm still a believer in that. I think, and we still have ways to do that. But I think in the meat of the game, the starting drives, the second first down, whatever's going on, when the guys don't change sides, they are responsible for knowing everything. But it also, I think, really keeps them involved. So I've been around a bunch of places where if you're the Z receiver, your guy always lines up to the field. You may go hours without a ball getting thrown to you. You may never, ever be in the game plan. Where here, if the ball goes to the right hash and you're on the right, you become the X. And so now you're running tunnel screens and you're running quick. Like, everybody kind of does everything. And I really think that's, as a coach, I think that helps you get out of, he can't do this. Wow, he can't run that. Have you ever seen him do it? You're kind of basing it on, well, I saw him run around some cones. But maybe he's a guy as a screen runner that steps through tackles and runs through the smoke and is really good at it. So I think that's something. And again, I go back 4 or 5 years ago. I went to Penn State in the spring and was visiting with Joe Moorhead. And, Joe Moorhead said to me, I teach guys how to get lined up in 5 minutes. The outside guys are always off the line. Outside guys are always on the line unless there's tight in there. Slot receivers are always off. There you go. This is the 3 or 4 formations we're going to use. And like for me, we had always been, if it's this play, the inside guy's on, the outside guy's off. This play, he's here. That play, he's there. Where I think that you talk about playing with pace and tempo and all the words people use, but I think keeping guys in their spots and keeping it simple in how they get lined up, they're more involved. They understand kind of the big picture a little bit better, and it also gives them a chance to show what they can do.
I had those things too, Brian, for a long time that just complicated things, and then you needed a tag for it, and you needed to talk about it as a coach. And I got to the point with, the receiver alignment and who was on and who was off with, kind of like Joe at the starting point, but then I'd tell him, like, look, educated freedom. If it's advantageous for you as the inside guy to be up on this particular play, move up and point to that guy to get off and communicate, right? You guys fix it. If I have to be be doing it. It just complicates it, and let's keep it simple. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's funny, as you were talking about the Z receiver going for hours without catching the ball. I can remember as back, man, at Ohio High School coaches clinic, and Rich Rod was at West Virginia. So I think this was somewhere right around the early 2000s. And, you know, he pointed out as he's drawing everything up, is like, you got a kid you got to play. It's the booster president's son. Like, put him right here. Yeah.
Put the booster president's son out there. Yeah, I remember that. I was probably at that same one or heard that same one somewhere else. And again, I think what it does, you know, what it just gives you team rolls coverage one way. You see it more and more. Our quarterback last year could throw the ball 80 yards in the air. You know, completed 66% of his passes. Kevin Davis was just a great player. Was in the combine. Did a great job at the combine. You know, could make field throws. And you very rarely nowadays get open access to the boundary. You know, you're going to get pressed, you're going to get cover two back there. But a lot of your access is to the field. You know, it's the field slot, it's number one all the way out there. If you get a guy that can make those throws, you're involving that guy. Otherwise, defense is saying, there's no way this quarterback's throwing the ball out here. You know, we're not messing around with it. You know what I mean? We can move our alley player in, and we can mess around with our coverage, we can do all that stuff. They're not throwing to him. So, I just think it keeps you more open-minded. I think it gives you really, especially in practice, a chance to better evaluate what guys can do. You know, because it's like when we start a series, I have two outside guys with the ones, but one's not necessarily an extra Z. You know, they kind of go up to each other and go, right, what side are you playing? And I go right, you go left. And then that gives that. So I'm not scripting. You know, I mean, there's certain games are different, third downs are different in a game and all that stuff, but you're giving them a chance to kind of learn everything and show what they can do.
Because there's going to be those things then that remain consistent for you because they're part of what you do as a receiver coach. And I know in the last one, and I've told you this before, like, you know, I first got to know you through your drill tape or your teach tape that had been circulating and, again, kind of dating things. It definitely was on a DVD when I got it. I don't know that even happens anymore. Here, crazy thing with
yeah, definitely
with all this stuff going on, and you know, I normally go to the gym, and I'm like, shoot, I got to work out at home, so I find this old like DVD to do a routine, and I literally like for 2 hours I'm looking for a DVD player in the house, and I found a DVD player, and I can't find the power cord for it that was supposed to be attached to it. It was like, man, we're all digital now. But yeah, so it was the days of the DVD, and I just loved it. I mean, it was a very detailed tape, and even though you didn't have audio in that one, you could see the detail, the way you had done it and was going into it. So, you know, from that standpoint, and as a teacher of wide receivers, you know, what things are going to remain consistent for you?
Yeah, you know what? I tell you what, we went out to, and again, Sean Gleason was the coordinator here at Princeton. He left and went to Oklahoma State. And one of my first things we did here as a staff was go out there and visit them in the spring. And, you know, Mike Gersich had been there. I played with Mike in Mount Union, who's now with Texas. So offensively, you know, obviously Sean was going to run a lot of what we ran at Princeton. And Mike, you know, I've talked football with him over the years. So it was a really good trip. And the one thing that, again, and on these trips, like if you get 10 things great, 5 things great, if you get one thing great, you know, that you'll use every day. The thing I got was watching Casey Dunn, who's the receiver coach there, pre-practice, kind of stand on the sidelines, and just as a warm-up drill, you know, as he had his guys on the far hash, just launch deep balls to his guys, and they kind of fell under it and caught it. You know, and to me, like, that's work you never, ever get enough of it during practice. And when you do get it, you know, too much of it, you could put your guys into jeopardy where they're getting hurt, they're on the ground, there's a hamstring, something like that. And then when you don't get it, all you do is complain about not getting it. You know, we threw him one deep ball the whole practice and he dropped it. Well, you're not doing the other skills that are critical to winning and losing games. You're working on those a lot more. You know, so we'll start, you know, just watching that drill when we went out there. We started every practice since, which we call it long ball, where we get to, it's just what it sounds like. We set the jugs on the sideline. We fire the ball 50 yards across the field. They track it. They catch it, hands in front of their face. You know, they're not running at any point. You know, I'm like, listen, you are not getting – if you have to run to get the ball, let it sail over your head, you know, because they haven't warmed up at that point. God forbid you get somebody hurt in practice. If you can avoid it at all costs. So that's something we're going to work on, all the time. We're going to work on at least one day a week in season. We're going to work on our blocking. We're going to get, anytime there's any downtime, we're going to catch as many footballs as we can, because what you lose in practice is almost always individual. So, we're going to try to do as much of our ball work kind of around what the practice schedule is. So we'll long ball before. If you're on the special team, you're on the jugs on that special teams. If we'll go PAT, you're on the jugs there. If I'm with the returners, if you're not a returner, you're on the jugs. So, we're going to try to fill in those blanks everywhere we can. A lot of the stuff hasn't changed from when I started. I think I do a little bit less because I think there's stuff that I did in the beginning that I think I didn't see showing up on film as much. So it just kind of got to the point where I think I overcoached releases probably the first 5 years of my career. Instead of just telling guys to take leverage wherever they can get it and go as fast as you can and be sudden with your lower half and violent with your upper half. It was this whole elaborate set of rules that don't really work for everybody. Like when I started in the beginning, nobody ever foot fired. Don't foot fire. Foot fire is the worst thing ever. And I still don't love it. But if you have a littler guy, like a slot guy or a juice guy who's really good at it, then he can do it. Don't ever slide step. Slide steps are bad. Meanwhile, I have like 2 or 3 guys that are good at it. Go slide step. If you can be low and be sudden when you do it, slide step, get that guy moved, be violent with your upper half and go past him. So I think there's a little bit in terms of there's not the amount of drills that there were. I think practice for everybody has shortened, but I also think I've eliminated some stuff that I did and became like dogma for me. Like, I have to do this. And I'm like, well, it's never shown up on tape, and it's not what we do. If you would come out to practice and watch us now, a good bulk of that stuff is the same. I just think there's less of it.
I think the showing up on tape is such an important part, and I think a good exercise for any coach. And really now there's not an excuse for anybody at any level to not be doing this. The phone is right there in your pocket with a great camera on it that you could film things up. Who cares about the quality or your handshaking or whatever? The important part is you got something to teach off of. So you can film your drills up. And I think if you're putting together a teach tape, which is, to me, it's still a very, very valuable resource, both for you as a coach and for your players, that right after you do that drill, you ought to be able to find those cut-ups that show those exact things that you're teaching happening in the game. And there's your measure right there for whether you are running the right drills or not, is that it's showing up on film.
And the other thing is, for me, and this is for everybody nowadays, like social media, everybody curses social media and it's the worst thing ever and the internet's bad. Like the resources out there, like I'll just be, randomly on Twitter. And like yesterday, a rep popped up from a guy from Minnesota, slide stepping and running a slant. Like that goes on our system, almost immediately. I send that to one of our guys, say, put it up. And then at some point during the year, we're going to be talking about that. And I'm going to have video for it. So I think that the other part is it's not just your own stuff. The resources there are, YouTube and just all this stuff, it's just so more readily available that you can, I don't think there's anything to me better than sitting down with somebody or sitting in somebody's meeting and watching them. How do they address these things that come up during practice? How do they talk to each other? What's the interaction? But I think there's still enough stuff that you can do today without having to fly 6 hours and go watch somebody practice, that if you build up a library, not just what you're doing, but all the good stuff that you see, I think you're going to have some great resources.
It's funny, like, I think I see that changing now as all this information, as all this video, is all these clinic talks, et cetera, be readily available and easy to get to on social media, right there on your phone, whatever it might be. It's not about necessarily learning like the schemes anymore. Those are cheap to learn, right? But understanding the why behind those things, and as you said, like problem solving, being able to really get deep detail on things, like that's the challenge for us now as coaches. Like it used to be like, man, I got to learn that scheme, or you're sitting there padding the this team doing it again and again in a cut up list that you got or whatever. Like that stuff is readily available. That stuff is easy to do. What becomes more difficult, or I shouldn't say difficult, but the challenge for the coach is to get to the why. And once you get there, though, like none of this is out of context, right? So just because, Brian Flinn does this at Princeton, and it really works for them, we have to understand the whole context of it. How does this fit into their particular system? If we're talking about a scheme, or how does this release fit into the particular route concept they're running and the timing and the calibration? So, just because you see it in some place, you can't take it out of context. I think you always have to be considering the why behind it and how does this fit in the big picture and the entire package for this particular team before I just take it and say I'm going to adapt it to mine because it looks good.
With all this time we have, I think we're all, I've been watching, all the 24/7 style college football shows, and the thing I kind of listen for more than anything else is after a team loses, what does the head coach say to them then? What does the coordinator say then on these shows? You know what I mean? Because I think it's easy when you win, you can say whatever you want. You know what I mean? You sing a fight song and count down the number of points you scored. We all do all that. But, I think it's all right. That's when I think we all struggle to focus on the right things. And, how are you setting up the rest of the day and the rest of the week then in that moment when everybody's looking to, everything that you've worked your butt off is kind of going south, So, and scheme-wise, it's the same thing. I think there's, what fits what we do, what are the problems that we had, we know what we do well to be taught, oh, hey, it's good to have stuff affirmed. Oh yeah, we do that too. That's okay. Yeah. They do this the same way we do it, but that doesn't really do a whole lot of good. Where do we struggle? Oh, we were terrible in the red zone, or we weren't great on third down, or wherever it is. I think it's kind of the same idea where it's, okay, these are neat plays. It goes back to how I was coached in college and high school and there, but we have guys that can do them, that fit everything else that we're doing. Just like you're saying, I think those are harder questions to get answered.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, I asked you a question. What do guys, when they see what you're doing, whether that's Princeton as a whole or you as a receivers coach, what do you guys get asked about the most? What are people most interested in?
The questions we get are probably similar to what a lot of people get, which is, it's the RPO end of it, the tempo end of it, and I think, I don't know if we're doing a bunch of things differently than a lot of people, in terms of just in general, in particular, and the execution of it, I think is a little bit different. It was a really good experience for me last year. For the first time ever, I was the oldest guy in the offensive staff room. So Andy Orrick was our offensive coordinator, played at Princeton, now the O-line coach at Rutgers, left in the offseason. Played O-line, was our O-line coach and coordinator last year, and it just had a tremendous relationship with him. In terms of, he was very open to input. We would disagree. Sometimes stuff would get run, sometimes it wouldn't, but there was never any hard feelings. Again, our quarterback coach, Mark Rosenbaum, is a younger guy. Our tight ends coach, Mike Willis, who's now our coordinator, was a younger guy. The dynamic in there was so good in terms of being open to new ideas and also not being afraid, no, I don't want to do that. Afraid to say that to each other. I think that it really kind of got me going, as an older guy, gave me some juice, and it was a lot of fun. One of the things that we had messed with when I was at Villanova and started in the last couple of years, and then, really did a good amount of stuff last year and are still evolving, are the wide splits from the outside guys. So pushing number one, on the red line in between the sideline and numbers. Number two's in the divider between the hash and the top of the numbers, and then making defenses decide with their nickel or their alley player, are you going to play the run or play the pass? And doing our 4 vertical pass game off those real wide splits, and a lot of our RPOs off those really wide splits. And I give Andy a ton of credit for that, because he had been here, in 2018, and they were the best offense in the country. They scored 47 points per game. They put 3 skilled guys in the NFL off an FCS team. He didn't do anything. And he said, no, we're going to run exactly what we ran. Because it's not broken. And we did for, 99% of it we did. But the fact that, he was so open to that stuff, and you see a bunch of it today, it goes back to Art Briles Baylor stuff with the wide split. Syracuse does it. Kent State did an awesome job with it last year. I thought they did a great job coaching that team and getting a ton out of them. So I think that's one of the things, really, because of, all the stuff going on now, we really only had a couple teams come in, but that was kind of stuff they asked, hey, are you doing the wide split stuff? And what are you doing out of it? You're doing your 4 verticals, you're doing some RPO stuff, but what's next? What are you doing to break tendencies? And I think that's been a lot of fun for us.
Since you brought it up, I want to talk to you a little bit about the wide split stuff. It was something, we utilized the last couple of years. I was coordinating an offense And there were definitely some advantages to it, and trying to break defenders off and really define who are they really trying to defend here. Make them defend one thing rather than playing in a place where they could be in a position to at least support on two things. So your thoughts on the wide splits and the I guess the best way to use those.
Yeah, I think the thing that really, and a lot of us, if you're listening to this or you're watching online clinics, every year, like you have an offense that you really want to follow. And the one year it was Baylor, but it's probably 3-4 years in a row, whenever that was. And they were really, I'm sure a lot of other people did it, but they were the ones that kind of took it mainstream. Now the guys that are in that offense are kind of secretive. They're not big sharers. That's just kind of the nature of who they've worked for and what their thoughts are. But I had watched a lot of it, and obviously they had a bunch of talented guys, Heisman Trophy winner quarterback, all these draft picks and receivers. But the one thing that stood out to me was when you do that, your slot guy a lot of times is isolated on a safety. Again, I thought Mike Yerson did a really good job this at Oklahoma State. They play those man quarters outfits. You wide split those guys, and it really just turns into cover zero. With all this area to cover and guys. And whenever you're in a one-on-one, do your wide receiver DBs one-on-ones, it's the slot runs away from the safety all day. He's 5 for 5. He never loses a rep. And then in the games, I don't think you put that guy enough in those situations to win. Where I think if he's tucked in there too far, sometimes he never gets to safety level, or his breaking point is so far in front of the safety's face that the guy drives on him. So I think that was kind of the tipping point for me, where it was like, listen, our juice guy is usually the little guy in the slot like most everybody else. How do we best get him matched up against the worst cover guy, or again, get him matched up against the nickel or alley and then, run pass off of that guy. So I think it's something that's, again, we're still coming up with more and more to do out of it. I think that's one of our, the things we were adding in the off season and really going to institute in the spring. It's just going to have to carry over to fall camp. But that's something I think that everybody has a guy that can beat the safety who might not be 6'4", but how do we get him in that position?
Great points, Coach. The last time we talked, I'm going to give you credit. You were the first guy, I think, to come on and talk about analytics in such detail. I think we had some guys mention it before, but you really went into it and talked about the book and how those things were used, and introduced me to Rob Ash over at Championship Analytics, and we had him on, and now we've done several podcasts, even had a series in season about analytics. And so last time, that was your share of something you wanted to really talk to the coaching community about and share, and it was an idea that I think is taken off now. So I'm asking you for another one. What's for you, with coaches out there right now, what do you feel is really important to share and help our coaching profession?
Yeah, I think it's, it's hard to pinpoint one thing. I think that the analytics is really, at our place here, we buy into it. Our head coach, Bob Serace, buys into it maybe more than anybody. In 2018, we were the number, I think it was between us and Army in terms of number of attempts to go down on fourth down. And then in terms of making it, we were number one in the country. Last year, we had 3 or 4 times, minus 20, 4th and 1. We're going for it in the first quarter. So I think that the buy-in there has been really the key as much as the analytics part of it. In terms of going forward, I think you're seeing it right now where a lot of us in this profession are really technologically averse. I'm not doing that. I'm not getting on social media. I'm not doing an online meeting. And I have some of this in me too. I'm not. But the sooner that you embrace that stuff, I think the better off you're going to be, whether it's recruiting or whether it's teaching, especially now with the constraints that we have with people being, everybody's at home and take care of themselves and staying safe. But I think to me, it's really there's a fine line going forward too, is embracing the technology that we have, the advances that we have, whether it's with the playbook, whether it's with the film, and you can go up to the point where it still works for you. And then what's not worth it? What's not productive? What doesn't add value? Because we only have so many hours in a day. I'm getting a lot of us are doing meetings on Zoom and stuff like that right now. And a lot of people tell me, I'll meet with my guys 6 days a week. It's like, well, is that really? what are you going to talk about with them next week, football-wise? They're not going to run till August. Now, or to check in with them and seeing how they're doing and how their families are, and is everybody safe? Okay, I get that. But, like, at what point is it diminishing returns? So I think the front end of it, like I said, again, a lot of our playbook stuff I think has been really good. We use Just Play, which is all online, and guys can access it on their phone and they can access it on their iPad, and the drawing is just so much better than all the other stuff I've used, Visio and PowerPoint, and going all the way back to Playmaker Pro. And I think it's just a matter of there's so many things you can use now, and I think it seems like we have one or two extremes where I'm not using any of it, or I'm going to use all of it. I think it's somewhere in the middle is, this is worth it. It's good for the players. It's not a waste of time. It's not a waste of money. Because again, I think, even you talking about, DVDs and all that stuff. I mean, even in the past 5 years, it's just, there's so many different things you can do that I think it's really, you have to familiarize yourself with it, to determine what's worth it. Because the one thing I hate doing is wasting anybody's time, whether it's our players, my coworkers. There's only, we need to get done, and let's get it done. But I think that going forward is really gonna, because in this business, we don't like to, we like to create work for ourselves. How much of that is really relevant, I think, is an important thing to figure out.
Definitely. I think that's great advice. And well, we've seen it now. We did have Jonathan Brewer on from the U, came on and talked about how they use it there, and it's, making a difference for them during this time during this shutdown. And I mean, it's one of those things, as you sit back and think about this now, I think our country's learned a lot about how do you approach a situation like this, where you start to see, something like an infectious disease like this, that I don't think this would be the last time that we shut things down. I think we'd be more proactive. And so it might come where you're down for a week or, 2 weeks or whatever, just, in the future, hopefully not. But I mean, I could see it as a reality now. And so you better have learned from that situation and be prepared the next time. I'm not saying you have to be, one of those guys who's setting up for the end of the world, but just, it's a Bill Walsh thing, right? Like, be prepared for all contingencies. And this was one that kind of caught us off guard.
And again, it's a matter of understand where you're at in the calendar year. Like, this was the time of year for college coaches where everything was ramped up to working with the players on the field and in the meetings. And it's like, all right, we lose this time, but there's nothing we can fill all that time with if they're not here and we're not there, and the attempts to do that, like, make sure it makes sense. Am I going to get them up at 7 a.m, get everybody on Zoom, on a Saturday? Like, no, I just think it still has to pass the common sense test, and it has to be efficient. Like, an hour on a Zoom meeting is like 2 hours in person. Guys are going to be staring up in the ceiling. There's going to be somebody on their iPhone. There's going to be guys. Or in bed, for crying out loud. So I just think you have to be efficient with everyone's time, especially your own.
Absolutely. Coach, I know you guys recruit nationally at Princeton. What areas are you responsible for in your recruiting?
Yeah, we switched it up. So I have all of Pennsylvania, all of Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and West Virginia. So kind of, a good amount of where I've been and where I've been from. But it's really a lot of what we do turns into positional recruiting, after that really initial phase. I think that's one thing that's different for me. At Villanova, we were Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, kind of driving distance for the most part. Here in the receiver room, we only have one guy from New Jersey. We have two guys from Hawaii. We have two guys from Louisiana. So it's definitely more of a national recruiting to find the guys that meet the academic requirements. But I also think it's the university also draws more of those kind of guys. The type of academics and the league we're in and the quality of the school, all that stuff. It's really more, people are more willing to fly from California to come to camp. They'll have people from Indiana come to practice for unofficial visits. So, that has been different. I love, the areas that I have are great. Obviously Ohio, I played at Mount Union, so there's probably 40 Ohio high school coaches that went to Mount Union that were PE guys there, played for Coach Karras. So that's been great. Pennsylvania, I've been here for 15 years. I had Western Pennsylvania, Villanova at one point. So it's been really, really good.
Yeah. Well, You should, number one, you should have drawn that Hawaii gig. I don't know how you didn't get that one. That would have been a good recruiting year. But make sure.
I tell you what, the Hawaii guys too, man. My two Hawaii guys are great. They are. One just won the heptathlon indoor track, or started an ex-receiver. Another one is a true freshman who's going to be a really good player for us. He's actually, headed out on a Mormon mission here, so they're going to be gone for a couple of years. But the Hawaii guys work their tails off. Now, when it's cold out, they get out, the two, Andre and Tamatoa, wear all their gear. They got hooded sweatshirts on and sweatpants over everything. But they go hard, man. They're great. They're great players. Football is important to them. We have three Hawaii guys on the team, really good freshman O-linemen, and then two receivers. So we don't do a lot of volume, but they've been really, really good.
Coach, as always, I appreciate what you do and appreciate you taking the time. Last thing before we go, I want to make sure everybody has your Twitter handle, especially if they're in your recruiting areas or have a receiver that they want to get across to you.
Yeah, for sure. It's Coach_Flinn, Flinn.
Coach, again, thank you. I appreciate taking the time. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Keith. I'll talk to you, bud.
Coaches, again, I want to remind you of what we're doing with the football development model. Please push this down to your youth coaches. I think this is a great way for you to get some organization and structure beyond what you've already done. Check it out, all of our program development for youth football at fdm.usafootball.com. Again, check out our systems for blocking, tackling, and defeating blocks at footballdevelopment.com. If you register with your email, you get your choice of 3 free videos. There's some great things in there. I think things that as you get going again, you can get into the summer and maybe make up on some things that you might have lost if you had a spring ball, if you had time here in the spring to work on football. Some great drills for all those phases of contact. If you're enjoying the podcast, please head it over to iTunes or your platform and give us a 5-star rate. If you have a minute, write a review. We really appreciate it, and we will read your review on our highlight show that we do at the end of the week.